Awesome. Ken, you there?
Okay. Yes.
All right, cool. We're live. We are live on YouTube right now. So it is
Thank you.
definitely recording on YouTube. So
Excellent.
I'll just go back and edit it when it's done, but I had to go through different things. So I apologize. But we're good to go. Why don't I do a brief intro, and then you can talk about your background, and we can get right into the book, Aleister Crowley's Influence on Pop-Occulture. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
It'll go live tomorrow on, I'll rip it and put it up tomorrow. It'll go out on the Ed Opperman report. So, and also
Wow.
Wake Radio, YouTube, all kinds of stuff. So
Great.
just like the last one. And if you have any questions or anything, feel free to go. But I'll just get started. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On tonight's show, I have a very special guest. His name is Ken Ammi. Did I get it right that time?
Yes.
Because I know I said it wrong last time, but he is a returning guest. He and I go way back. We both are interested in similar topics, the occult. Ken is a Christian, identifies as a Christian, and has written some terrific books and has a great website titled truefreethinker.com. So if you get a chance, go check that out. But he's recently published a book, and we're going to talk about that particular book tonight. He also has some additional books. He's a great writer and very prolific writer at that. But tonight's book is Aleister Crowley's Influence on Pop-Occulture. I've studied quite a bit of Crowley, and so is Ken. And he's taken a different angle, kind of showing a lot of different things that I never really knew about, things, the references to Crowley in comic books and music that I didn't know about. But he's going to go in greater detail about that. So, Ken, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome, man.
Pleasure to talk to you again.
Yeah, man. It's great. It's great to talk to you. I can't believe that we go back 5-6 years. I was looking back at an earlier email that we had talked about, and we've also kind of run into some of the occultists, not in good ways, but but we're still here. We're still here. But I read through your book. I really liked it. It was awesome. I actually put a 5-star review on Amazon before we started the show, so I was lucky to be the first one to review it. I appreciate the tip of the hat to me in your book too. So, but
of course,
thank you.
I meant every word.
No, I appreciate that. So to get started, can you, people who don't know your website, True Free Thinker, or you, Ken Ammi, can you talk a little bit about your background, please?
Ooh, that is a long story, but basically, I am Jewish, and then went through various phases in my life. The one I'll mention contextually for tonight's discussion is when I was in junior high school. And well, let me back up one step. So around 6th grade, I started reading about UFOs, witchcraft, and cryptozoology. So those were my interests. And then by the time I got into junior high school, I got into some of the dark side, death metal music, horror movies, basically anything that was dark, that's what I was into. And of course, you can only do that for so long before you run into Crowley, right?
Yeah, true. Very true.
And of course, these are pre-internet days, so you kind of had to really go looking for this stuff.
True.
And yeah. So, in essence, like I mentioned in my book, I definitely consider you the premier modern-day researcher of Crowley, and it is mostly because of you telling me about your book that I started kind of trying to pad the internet to be ready for this kind of point of view, which is let's talk about his influence in all forms of culture, like you mentioned, comics, TV shows, movies, music, you name it. People have been influenced by him.
Correct. And that's a long list. I mean, your book lists out in great detail many of the influences of Crowley, and you give some background about Crowley, about his ideas, things like that. But like, where did you start when you really, was it just things that you picked up in your research, or did you decide to just go by music, or how did you kind of come up with some of these people with their connection?
Well, let me reiterate something I mentioned to you earlier this week in an email, which is the more you look, the more you find, the more frustrating it is because there's so much out there. So even as we speak, I'm thinking of 2 more references that I could add to my book. I mean, it's just crazy the amount of information that just keeps pouring out about this topic.
Yeah.
So one thing I mentioned in the book, let me go back a little further than what you just asked me. which is that I remember viewing the documentaries Hell's Bells and They Sold Their Souls for Rock and Roll. And from what I recall, both of them had sections about Crowley's influence in music. It was the focus of those documentaries. And one of them made the point about just how many songs contain the lyric, which is derived from Crowley's famous motto, "Do what thou wilt," or "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." And when I heard that, it blew my mind, because I'd played music with 3 different bands, but I only wrote lyrics to one song. And guess what the chorus to that song was? "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." Okay, and that was in the early 90s. So it really, really shocked me when I heard that in the documentaries, realizing I had done that myself. And the one and only song I ever wrote lyrics for, there it was, the Crowley influence. And so you started talking to me about how you were going to chase down some of the big names and some of the slightly old-time names, and that made me think, well, let me see if I can chase down like a broader scope of things. And that's why I just looked at everything, like I said, TV, movies, comics, cartoons, music.
Yeah, I
and
mean,
that's where it all derived from.
Yeah, you've got names here of people I don't know, some bands, some death metal bands, more modern names. Him, I'm not familiar. Fabry, Fibra. I didn't know Damon. I knew Damon Albarn was an occultist. I didn't know that he walked around with Aleister Crowley's universal hexagram. That seems to be a common, motif or symbol that's used often by these guys. But
right, because I remember when we talked about the H.R. Giger documentary on Netflix, you told me you noticed one of the guys on there wearing that.
Yes, that's true.
And yeah, that I know who that guy is. He is the lead singer of the band Celtic Frost.
Interesting.
And so, yeah, that's why I don't mean to cut you off, but what they hint at, what they kind of are talking about in the documentary, is that Giger had allowed Celtic Frost to use one of his paintings for a cover of their album. And the cover is some kind of demonic looking guy using a crucifix with Jesus on it as a slingshot.
Right, I've seen that.
Yeah, and the album is called To Megatherion.
To Megatherion, the great beast, Aleister Crowley.
That's right. So that's where that connection came from.
Interesting. That's fascinating. Giger's still around. They just the newest Alien Covenant just came out, and all that design is by Giger, right?
Okay, I was going to say, just how are you saying that he's still around? Because personally, he's not.
His influence, let me qualify that. His influence is still around. So.
Oh yeah, his influence, and also from the Species movies franchise, which is very popular as well.
I didn't know that. What can you talk a little bit about that? I wasn't aware of that. What Species?
Yeah, well, it's a sci-fi horror movie. If you were to see any footage from it or a still, just by looking at the creature, you would instantly say, "Oh, okay, yeah, I recognize Giger's influence in that."
Right. And the rumor was, and he was friends with Timothy Leary. Giger was. He was also rumored to be the OTO head chapter of Crowley's OTO in Switzerland. I could never verify that, but that's my understanding.
Right, and I know both of us noticed. I put it in the book, that photograph of Giger in one of his art studies or art studios, and there's a picture of who in the background.
Crowley, right? Yeah. Well, he did a painting called Crowley or the B666, I think was its title, and it's full of symbolism, all these numerical references and things like that in his kind of black and white style. Did you ever decipher the meanings in that picture?
I will, now that you mentioned that, I'm going to have to look at it and kind of contemplate it, I suppose.
Because like the Crowley figure's wearing a clown's hat, like a witch's hat too. There's all these numbers in there, sevens and balls and all this other stuff that's in there that I never really could figure out the totality of its meaning. But I thought I saw like a numerical representation of the number 11. But I have to go back and look at that. But I think that's a remark. In addition to his other remarkable pictures, he has some other, occult influenced drawings, not just these pictures of this kind of crazy.
Oh yeah. Yes, he has some very strongly and obviously occultic references in there.
Yeah.
No question about it.
Yeah, so that's I mean, and then you talk about L. Ron Hubbard, you talk about the song lyrics as well. Every man and woman is a star, and that was the title, that Kenneth Anger used for his book. What was it? Hollywood Babylon. This reference from Crowley's Book of the Law. But some of these people are very famous. Taylor Momsen is the first person you have on the list.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but for the younger crew, millions of people are watching her videos.
Yeah, well, see, I would emphasize it this way. Millions of people are watching her on a cutesy, dramatic TV show.
Oh, she's on a TV show too? I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah, let me see. Gossip Girl.
Oh, she's on Gossip Girl. I didn't know that.
Right. So, basically you're watching this cute young girl in this kind of comedy drama, and isn't that wonderful? And then you hear, oh, she's a singer too. Well, isn't that interesting? Let me check out her singing. And guess what? I mean, you're going to get the dark side, right?
Right. I mean, I saw one of the videos. It's remarkable. It's like fully occult oriented, satanic lyrics, pretty graphic.
Right, and I mean, that's been one of my things I've noticed for a long time, which is, for example, Oprah Winfrey would trot out Christina Aguilera to stay-at-home moms who watch her show, and isn't she just a clean-cut, wonderful young lady? And guess what? No, she's not. But see, you're trotting her out for public consumption. You're painting her to be this good old-fashioned girl. But she's not. But see, that's how then a young child would go to mom and say, oh, can I buy the album or go to the concert by Christina Aguilera? Oh, sure, I saw her on Oprah. Isn't she just a wonderful gal? And well, no, your kids are not going to get that wonderful gal.
Right. Yeah, no doubt.
So
I've
noticed that it happens a lot. These people get trotted out for public consumption, just like Miley Cyrus being on, what's that TV show? The Voice.
Right. That's right.
Okay, well, you're not going to get that cute young girl when you look at her albums, lyrics, and videos. You're going to get the dark side.
Yeah, her naked with all kinds of weird stuff. Yeah,
right.
Crazy stuff. Yeah, Taylor Momsen, and she's young. I mean, she'll probably continue to be this kind of dark occult influence for years to come. I mean, she's 24 years old. It's nothing.
Well, let's hope she repents, because, Peaches Geldof was very much the same, a nice young girl, and guess what? She's passed away now.
Yeah, I write about her in Children of the Beast. I covered her because of her either dabbling or involvement in the OTO and the kind of heroin chic, like it's cool to do heroin, kind of like Crowley did, and it led directly to her demise. When they did an inquest into her death, they said she was like, her arms were a pincushion. She was doing tons of high-grade heroin, yeah. And I mean, it's a tragic story because she ended up dying and her baby was in her arms. I mean, how... Oh,
God. That is tragic. Absolutely tragic.
I actually have a friend of mine on Facebook was her boyfriend for a little bit. So I got some interesting information about her that I never really published, but it's a tragic story, and she was the daughter of, Geldof, what's her dad's name? He was from the Boomtown Rats. So she was kind of like rock royalty in a way.
Right.
With this guy who did Live Aid, but it's just a tragedy. So it's not.
Yeah, and well, one thing that I mentioned in the book is whenever you hear modern day artists and artists of any format, right? Musicians, movie makers, regardless of what they are, when they comment about their art, inevitably they speak of it in terms of deconstruction and destruction and breaking down taboos and and all this, and that is a philosophy, right? It's not that has not traditionally been the point of view. If you look at the true and great artists of days gone by, painters, musicians, poets, they all inevitably said that they were doing their art for the glory of God.
Right.
Okay, and their art has lasted for centuries. Okay, now modern day artists, inevitably, they talk about destruction, deconstruction, breaking down, tearing down. And you have to recognize that is a philosophy under which they're working. And
So
so you have,
excellent.
you have Crowley here supposedly channeling, saying, to worship me, take wine and strange drugs. And well, guess what? We have a whole culture of celebrities and so-called artists doing that, even to their death.
No, it's true. And I mean, that supposedly, that book of the law, that quote is recited to Crowley from Satan, according to Crowley. I mean, he veiled it, put in blinds and stuff like that, but Awas was Satan.
Right,
So
right.
you see this direct tie between these doctrines and the culture and, early these people dying young.
Yeah, and then another thing Crowley talked about, to stay on or to get to the topic of music for a second, is if you remember back in the 80s and the whole satanic panic thing and all these dumb pastors complaining about how their satanic messages and records, if you play them backwards, well, they didn't just make that up. I mean, Crowley himself specifically spoke about walking backwards, talking backwards, and playing music backwards. So,
right, as a magical exercise, yeah.
That's right. So these pastors weren't just paranoid; they were actually taking the guys seriously.
Right, and you find out then that the musicians themselves are taking Crowley seriously too, right? I mean, that's kind of or this occult.
I will say about what they call backmasking. There's at least two forms. Okay. And I mean, of course, I remember the days when you actually put a record on the needle and you could stop it with your finger and run it backwards. Now, you could run an entire song backwards and you sort of have to interpret, well, I think I heard this and ooh, that sounds like that. That to me is not that impressive because you're literally just interpreting noise. But there are songs where there's obvious backwards messages. In fact, I remember when I was a teenager, I had an Iron Maiden album, and it's between songs, so it's nice and quiet. And all of a sudden, you hear this, this backwards talking. It was very obvious. So I put my finger on the record and spun it backwards, and yeah, it was definitely a backwards message.
Interesting.
You know what it said?
No, what?
It said, "Don't mess with things you don't understand."
Interesting. So they put the secret thing in there for people who are going to do it. Oh, that's funny. Well, I think Bruce Dickinson is a huge Crowley fan. He actually made a movie about Crowley titled Crowley. I think in the States. In the UK, it was some other name. I forgot. Not a great movie.
It's ironic because the drummer of Iron Maiden became a Christian, and he's a drummer in his church's worship band. And Dickinson went the other way completely. He even played in a side band called Chemical Wedding.
That's right. That's based upon Crowley, right? Yeah.
Right. I mean, chemical wedding is an alchemical term.
Right. That's right.
Right. So it's interesting that within that band you have these guys going in completely opposite directions.
Right. That's interesting. But just to add on that, I think that was the name of the Crowley movie in the UK. I think he titled.
Yes, you're right. Yes, it was. Yes, it was. You're right. Yeah, that's what it was.
Right. So.
And it wasn't a very good one, by the way.
No, there were actually the very good sequences. There was one that I really liked, which was they had Crowley in the last part of his life when he was in Hastings at this boarding house. It was played by John. I don't know why I remember the actor's name, but John Shrapnel played an aged, like decrepit, decaying Crowley, and he did just a perfect job. It's a shame that the whole movie was lousy, but that one acting sequence, and it was the guy who was visiting Crowley turned out to be Crowley's literary executor, a guy by the name of John Simons, who wrote a book about, I think it was something about the beast. I can't remember the title of his book, but the OTO members thought Simons did a disservice in protecting kind of Crowley's legacy, but which, if you're an occultist, it's probably true, because I think Simons told a little bit too much truth. But it's an interesting sequence in an otherwise pretty lousy movie, but there's a lot of occult references there. There's the Scarlet Woman. There's all kinds of stuff.
Right.
The science fiction sequences they had looked super cheap. I mean, it looked like sequences from Star Trek looked more advanced, like the original Star Trek on TV looked more advanced than what was in this Crowley movie. But Bruce Dickinson's in the movie too. He plays the kind of housekeeper at the earlier part of Crowley, so you can see him in there. And he was the person who spearheaded that film. I think he wrote it and did everything. So anyway.
And I know people like you and I would watch that movie, as unpleasant and bad as it was, just to try to derive some of the hidden occult meaning from it,
No
to
question.
understand what these guys are trying to tell us or tell each other.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's full of it. I mean, there's full of these occult references, Crowley, this, but yeah, and all these phrases and stuff that Crowley used. So
It's full of it, all right.
yeah, it's something else. But moving on, the next person on your list is 311. Do you want to talk about the band 311?
Well, I was actually a big 311 fan back in the day. You see here right away, I mentioned the oddity of their name. I mean, why is it 311? Why isn't the band called 311 or 311? Why 311? And I certainly don't know, but I just made my guess at it right off the bat. That's something interesting about them.
Which is 3 times 11, 11 the number of magic. Is that it?
Yeah, and then that my emphasis was that 311s is 33.
Right. So you got the top number in Masonry, right?
Right. And these guys, they definitely have some Buddhist influence, but all their stuff is really saturated with occult symbolism, and at least their bass player is probably the most outspoken, straight up anti-Christian.
I think one of them has a tattoo of "Do What Thou Wilt" on their leg.
Right. Yeah. Yes, that's the one. The bassist. Yeah, Peanut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're all. What's the story? I don't even know who Sean Avery is. Who's that?
Well, one thing I wanted to mention, because honestly, I don't know a lot of these artists either. So the interesting thing is the ease of which I was able to do some of this research is only because of the internet. Because if we go back a couple decades, I don't know how I could have even compiled so many song lyrics. Where would I even find them, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
So it was extremely easy to go to one of these many websites there are that have nothing but song lyrics, and just type something like Crowley in the search engine, or type in "Do What Thou Wilt" or "Everyone's a Star," and I gotta admit, it's pretty spoiling as a researcher to get spoiled with the ease in which I can do that. So yeah, a lot of these artists, I never actually listened to them. I'm not really aware of who they are, but I was able to quickly compile a whole bunch of lyrics and a lot of different references.
Yeah, it's true.
So let me see. Yeah, Avery, he actually, it's not just about his lyrics, but he actually speaks about how he's, interested in the kind of things that Crowley did. Yeah.
Do you know that? Yeah, I just haven't heard his name. That's all. Yeah, it's interesting. He talks about Crowley. So does Elijah Blue Allman, who was the son of the recently deceased one of the Allman brothers. What was his name? It was Cher's son, right? She's
right.
Cher's son, right?
Correct.
And so I didn't know that he was a Crowley aficionado, but it's just almost like a default. Like,
right.
You just assume that everybody in the music business loves Crowley, and then there's some oddballs, that aren't. It seems like that's the thing. I mean, the son of John Lennon's into Crowley and Anger. I mean, all these people are into this stuff. It's remarkable.
And so one thing I also mention in here is that sometimes you look beyond the specific term, "Do what thou wilt," those words in that order, but you can also recognize that same concept in something even as seemingly meaningless as the Nike motto, "Just do it."
Right. It's true.
Right. I mean, to me, and I'm not saying that the Nike shoe company is out preaching occultism, but I'm saying that the message is the same. Right. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, I watched the documentary on Netflix about the band Twisted Sister. Well, I would be hard pressed to say that they're satanic. They're more just like a good time rock and roll band. But yeah, I mean, there is footage of Dee Snider yelling at the crowd, "Hey, we're Twisted Sister, and you can do whatever bleep bleep you want." It's the same basic message, which is there's no rules, there's no law. Do whatever you want, even at your detriment. And that's basically the for some reason they think that's the rock and roll lifestyle. Like, I don't know if you got to the point in the book about where the singer from the band Rotting Christ is complaining about the singer of Megadeth, because the singer of Megadeth, Dave Mustaine, became a Christian.
Oh, interesting.
Okay, so Dave Mustaine says, hey, you know, we don't mind touring with bands that are into the dark side of life, because the life can be dark, but we don't want to tour with bands that are straight up satanic.
Interesting.
Okay, and so the singer from Rotting Corpse is basically saying, oh, wow, you know, I thought Dave was metal. You know, he's supposed to be metal. It's like, well, okay, but what gives you the authority to define metal as therefore we must be satanic? I mean, what are you talking about?
Yeah, interesting.
You're now imposing your subjective standard onto Dave, and then you complain that Dave is imposing his subjective standard upon you. You're basically just being hypocritical.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it seems like now that we go back to Iron Maiden, these bands there's some that go Christian and some stick with the occult, right? And they seem to be fighting with each other. It's interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, Iron Maiden is a special case for me because I was an Iron Maiden fan for many, 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 many years, and I'm not hesitant to say they could have gone down in history as being the most educational band. Unfortunately, they got into displaying a lot of, you know, scary horror, satanic imagery, and that kind of gave them a bad name to the outside world. Now, within heavy metal, that gave them an even better name. But they do have a very educational side of them.
Right? Didn't they do a song on the Rime of the Ancient Mariner? I mean, that's
you know what?
classic poem.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because as a teenager, I read their lyrics, and it said that it was based on this ancient poem. So I got myself to the library and I looked it up. And so here I am, a teenager at the library reading a poem from the 1700s, only because a heavy metal band played off of it.
What is it? Water everywhere, not a drop to drink?
Yeah, all the boards did shrink. Water everywhere, nor a drop to drink. Yeah.
That's right.
And, you know, they sang songs about Murder in the Rue Morgue.
Right. So that's God. What's the author of Murder in the Rue Morgue? It's
you know,
I know his face, from Baltimore. His name is.
I hear you typing away.
No, I'm going to type right now. Here we go. Because the thing is, the reason I knew that is because I read a compendium of all his.
Edgar Allan Poe.
Edgar Allan Poe, yes. I read all short stories. Really good.
They sang historical songs, you know, the Ides of March, and songs about World War II, and
Aces
all
High,
kinds of
right? Yeah, like there was good references. Classic references.
They had a lot of lyrics that dealt with history and literature, and that was awesome.
Right. What was the one? What was the Ride of the 3000 or whatever? There was one about like another classic poem. I forgot what it was.
Well, let me put it this way. There came a point, once they put out their album Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, that's when I was not interested in them anymore from thereafter, because honestly, their music was a little too soft for my taste in those days.
Interesting.
If you can imagine that.
That's pretty funny. No, it was the Ride of the 3000. Now I can't remember. Oh, man. The Troop was based upon something like that. Oh, well. Anyway, yeah, Iron Maiden, you know, that's just, I mean, there's a lot of occult stuff there. There's a lot of classic literature there. I mean, it really is.
Yeah.
What do you want to talk about next? I mean, Almond, we can go to Russell Brand, Morrison.
Yeah, well, I was looking at the section on the Rolling Stones.
Okay, let's do that.
Because you recall that I had a recent movie about the Rolling Stones by Stephen Woolley. The movie is called Stoned. Okay. And remember, I pointed out to you, wow, there's a scene in there that's an S&M scene. And they're basically having an S&M tryst right in front of a huge poster of Crowley.
Interesting. Fascinating. Is it interesting? Sounds like Performance. You ever hear this movie Performance?
That does not sound familiar.
Yeah, I covered that in Children of the Beast. It was a guy who actually sat on the knee of Crowley, made this movie that had Rolling Stones Jagger in it. So it was interesting performance.
And then, of course, this is something that's relatively well known, but on the cover of the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Club Hearts Band, there's a doll, and on the doll it says, "Welcome the Rolling Stones."
Right.
So the Beatles were paying homage to the Rolling Stones, and then the Rolling Stones put out the album Her Majesty's Satanic Request.
Right.
And in the album, they had hidden pictures of all four Beatles. So there's this kind of like circular thing. Yeah, if you go to the book page 97, 96, 97, it's right there.
Didn't the early Stones, didn't the Beatles write some of the early Stones songs? That's what I remember.
I'm not sure about who wrote for whom, but you can see this kind of circular, hey, listen to these guys, and hey, listen to these guys in turn.
Right, helping each other out. Yeah.
And of course, the famous, well-known fact that Crowley appears on the cover of the Beatles album.
Right. Interesting. And then let's talk about Damon Albarn of the Gorillaz, and he was in Blur. He walks around with Crowley's 7, what is it, the Seal of Babylon on his neck,
right?
On his chest, right? Yeah.
Yeah, Babylon. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's one of the. Remember, I sent you a link to that just I think 2 weeks ago, and that's when I told you go, William. The more this never ends, because that was something brand new to me.
No, it doesn't end. There was a guy I wanted to tell you about. He was a new rapper, and his name was Ab-Soul. You ever hear of Ab-Soul?
No, but I tell you what, I'm going to have you send me an email with all these interesting references you're bringing up that I did not include, because
there's so much out there. You could literally write another book. You have a 250-page book. You can go to 500. You actually cover a lot of the new African-American artists who are referencing occult stuff. But this guy, Ab-Soul, actually had an album titled Do What Thou Wilt.
Wow.
And I think
straight up.
Yeah, straight up the 4th studio album of rapper Ab-Soul. And this guy's apparently very popular. I haven't heard any of his stuff, but December 9th, 2016. So it's pretty positive positive stuff from critics. So anyway, Ab-Soul is interesting. You had Chance the Rapper. What was the guy's name? No, it was another dude. You had Ciara, and the other one was Tyler the Creator.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you pretty much look up anything on Tyler or his band, his group, the Odd Future Wolfgang Kill Them All.
Interesting.
If you look up anything about them, like if you just type them into a search engine that shows images, inevitably you're going to get something satanic. It's just that's how often they display that sort of a thing.
Yeah, he's got the pictures of Crowley all over doing weird signs.
Yeah.
All there. So, I mean, even the kind of African-American, what about the death metal guys? I mean, all these death metal, Merciful Fate, Coven, Rotting Christ, Moonspell, these Death SS, these bands I've never heard of, but all Crowley.
Yeah. Merciful Fate, that was, I used to be a really big fan of that band back in the day. And, it's funny because looking back to think of some of the things I would allow to just pump into my head and enjoy. I mean, even, within another context, I also think back to when I used to be into reggae music and just really enjoying Bob Marley's song Talking Blues. Well, when I think about it now, I realize, wait a minute. In that song, he says, I feel like bombing a church.
Interesting.
And he says it's because the preacher is lying. And so thinking back, I just think, well, back in the day when I was enjoying that song, why didn't that ever stand out at me as, wait a minute, this is just not acceptable. I mean, this is supposed to be a peace and love guy, And why is he singing about wanting to bomb a church?
That's interesting.
You know, it's because he disagreed with the theology.
Right.
So it's the same thing with Merciful Fate in one of their songs, having a straight up oath to Satan, to devote your life to Satan. There it is, just right there.
It's amazing. I typed in Tyler the Creator, Aleister Crowley, and a cover of my original book, Prophet of the Evil, popped up in the search. So somebody, subliminal synchrosphere OTO. Somebody must have. That must be an old article or something.
Well, you have arrived, William.
I'm there. I'm there. I'm on a thing with Jay-Z. Says "Do what thou wilt." My book is somewhere on the picture there. Interesting. Yep, there it is. Recall in the previous post we mentioned Crowley and 9/11 and the Thelemic undertones and numbers, 93 being the number of Thelema. That's correct. So yeah, I mean, it's all over the place. I mean, I think there's probably somebody in Hollywood who just initiates all these people in droves, don't you think? Probably some OTO member.
Well, you know, you mentioned Hollywood. I put up a post about how many times I've noticed the number 11 being an obvious feature of a movie. And I mean, that was another one of those things that it literally never ended. You know how many times I edited that article to add more stuff to it? It was crazy.
I'm not surprised at all. Yeah, I mean, I've noticed that too. Once you kind of see an eye for that, it pops up.
That's right. That's right.
Once you have an eye. Talk about Kirk Hammett and Adam Jones. Isn't Kirk Hammett the guitarist of Metallica?
Yes.
Was he into Crowley? I didn't know that.
You know, if you notice that section, they don't talk about Crowley.
Okay. I gotta go.
The reason I included it is because of the underlying context, which is that these guys are bringing a very purposeful occultic philosophy into what they do as musicians.
Interesting. Gotcha.
Okay, so that's something, yes, that's something they're very open about. And right before that, I mentioned the drummer from the band Tool, who is also incredibly open about it. He has the Seal of Babylon and other sigils on his actual drums, and he says that basically he allows something to possess him, and he plays on his drums whatever the being is expressing through him.
Fascinating. Wow, that's straight up demon possession. I know he has one of the biggest original Crowley libraries in the world because he's collected everything.
And the thing about Kirk Hammett and then Adam Jones from the band Bad Religion is they're taking more of a philosophical approach in that what they're trying to do through their music isn't just to play music. And if you hear occultists or even New Agers, sometimes they'll talk about what they do and how they do it, and sometimes even the colors that they wear, the words they use, the movements that they make, all of it is meant to affect somebody subliminally.
Interesting.
Just affect them on every conceivable level. And so, like here, Hammett's talking about a bee. There's a painting of the insect, a bee, on his guitar, and he says, which is symbolic of knowledge, the raven symbolizing secret knowledge, and then the all-seeing eye, symbolic of universal knowledge. So, you know, you look at his guitar and you're like, oh, that's kind of wacky, all these cool figures on it. Well, right, to him, it means something, and it's conveying something.
Right. Well, that makes sense. I didn't know till now that the raven represents secret knowledge. I knew it represented something, but it pops up all the time in Sons of Anarchy, all these other kind of shows. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
The raven's all over the place. If you keep an eye, there's a lot of occult pictures and things like that of women holding ravens, things like that. It makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense. What else do you want to move on to? We've probably been talking a good 45 minutes, I think. Anything else you want to cover? Do you want to get into the kind of the more movies and comic references?
I was actually going to make a statement and then ask you a question, if you don't mind.
Go for it. Fire away. We can invert the whole thing. You can interview me, whatever you want.
Oh, yeah. No, in fact, why don't you quickly, if you remember off the top of your head, give us the names of the people you cover in your book.
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I really tried to go back from the beginning of the people that Crowley influenced. So not as much modern as you did.
Right,
Like
right.
you kind of covered post-life Crowley, 1947. I included people who met Crowley in real life. So there were people like Ian Fleming, who had known Crowley. There was another writer, a guy who wrote The Devil Rides Out, Dennis Wheatley, who was really the Stephen King of his age. There and wrote a lot of occult-related books, including a lot of stuff that influenced Ian Fleming's Bond series. And then I also wrote about Augustus John, who was an interesting character who did about 4, drafts or first-hand drawings of Crowley. Crowley sat for him. He was a famous artist, but the interesting thing about Augustus John is he was a libertine who actually had a daughter with Ian Fleming's mother. And so this girl, her name was Amaryllis Fleming, was kind of an illegitimate daughter of Ian Fleming's mom. It's interesting. So you see this connection between Augustus John, who knew Crowley,
Right.
and interestingly, Ian Fleming thought that Augustus John was the ideal representation of what a man should live life. And Augustus John was kind of like not a hermit. He was like what's the word for it in England? He's basically not what are the people?
Bohemian?
A bohemian, yeah. Bohemian's a good word. But traveled around with his wife and his girlfriend, both living together. And he used to make a joke like, I never know which of these kids is mine, like walking around.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because he was like that. But yeah, Augustus John was really a remarkable character, but it ties Fleming to Crowley. And Ian Fleming wrote his first book, which was Casino Royale. The character, his name was, I can't remember his name, but he's based upon Crowley. It was the Sheaf, Schiffre. The cipher was this big fat-headed guy, bald, based upon Crowley. But yeah, Ian Fleming was it. I mean, you had these. Who else did I include in those early ones? J.F.C. Fuller, who was an early follower of Crowley, wrote a book with Crowley and ended up influencing Hitler's forces and actually went to Hitler's 50th birthday in Berlin. And there's actual interesting interrelation between this mass killer Hitler and J.F.C. Fuller. I would actually you can make a very good argument that Hitler was really a political Crowley, kind of put all his ideas into work. This kind of slave shall serve, slave state, be off the weak. And they actually, Hitler, and I include Hitler in my book, they actually said similar things. Crowley said, success is the sign, is the perfect result, or the perfect result of action is success or something. And Hitler said something very similar to that. He just believed success was the right result, result of action is to victory. It comes out of the Book of the Law. It's an interesting thing. And yeah, so, I covered a lot. The book is long. It's about 400 pages. It has tons of footnotes. But I really kind of just who was the other one? It was Somerset Maugham, who included Crowley in his book, The Magician, this kind of character. And you cover
Yes.
Oliver Haddo, right? So Oliver Haddo was used sometime later in The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. So this character who is definitely Crowley. And there's Crowley writes about Somerset Maugham, who was best friends with Ian Fleming. So when Ian Fleming had his first heart attack, the first person who visited him was Somerset Maugham. So these guys, all kind of operated together in the same, culture. So I tried to show that in the early parts of Children of the Beast. And then, I talk about kind of later characters, Anger. I think, Manson, one of the interesting things about Anger is he's a direct tie into the Manson family, but they never really talk about it when they talk about Charles Manson. The fact that Bobby Bouzoulet lived with Kenneth Anger and was in Lucifer Rising is, I think, a vitally important part of the whole Manson story, but it's always left out. But that's just a little bit that I can remember off the top of my head.
Well, and I did that on purpose, respecting your work so much and knowing what you were covering. I purposefully wanted my book to be more like the modern day version of it. So I think that they work well together in that way.
I agree. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in here. I didn't really know about so much Japanese anime, Crowley stuff. I didn't know a lot of cartoon stuff.
Oh, yeah. Anime is just saturated with occult.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
So that's really that was really fascinating, at least for my reading. But yeah, I mean, it's remarkable. I mean, the thing is that you can see these ties from Crowley to Fleming and James Bond, and here's James Bond, one of the most influential,
Right.
you know, movie series and book series in human history, influenced by a guy who was talking to Crowley about the Hess. You know, the thing is Fleming lured Hess into northern England and then had him captured based upon a fake pretense that there was a conservative group that would try to negotiate with the English government for peace against Germany. And Hess was, you know, the number 3 in the Third Reich. Like, this was not a low-level person. Hess, yeah. So, and he's involved in Hess is trying to Crowley offered his services to debrief Hess.
Yes.
So it's really fascinating, this kind of ties that are. I mean, the World War II was 70 years ago. It's not that long. There's still people alive who went through that, you know. So
right, because Ian Fleming wasn't just an author; he was involved in British intelligence.
Absolutely. I mean, he wasn't just involved. He actually sat underneath the head of their admiralty. So, like the United States has kind of 4 different military branches, but the real military branch in England is the seafaring branch. This is the most powerful aspect of the British military. And Fleming was basically the guy right underneath the top. And the guy who ran it, I can't remember his name offhand, but he said Fleming was a war winner. And you can see pictures of Fleming is clearly traveling around. There's pictures of him with Lucky Luciano. So he knew all these guys, and there's a lot of stuff that there's interviews of Ian Fleming with Canada Public Television, where he's saying, I could tell you stories, but I'd be in violation of the Secrecy Act, you know? So there's all these stories that he took vignettes from from real-time stuff that he experienced and put it in James Bond. So all of these gambling sequences where they're always gambling with the enemy, those are all things that he did while he was in Portugal. And one of the interesting aspects of Fleming is he wrote the foundational document for the American CIA. So he put this together, and the United States absorbed all of these ideas that Fleming had. So Fleming is really a remarkable character. Spoke fluent German, you know, really something else, but really super talented. Came from a banking family. Was the best athlete at Eton 2 years in a row. But unfortunately, kind of pissed it all away on high living and cigarettes. Like he had a heart attack and didn't stop smoking. So
wow.
Yeah, not wise. And he always was a high liver. He always went to get to the best restaurants and always had gin and smokes. So it's not a way to have a long life. So, but when he died, they had his gravestone wasn't a normal gravestone. It was the what do you call it? Masonic obelisk style gravestone. So it's pretty clear that he was affiliated with the secret knowledge, at least in my opinion. And you know, they intersperse it throughout a lot of his books. Ouroboros is included in one. And I have to go back. I'd love to sit down and read all his books and really decipher them, decode them, but I just haven't had the time. Any other questions? Anything else? Well, this is what I want to ask you. You asked me a question, then I want to talk about your other book that you've been on a furious pace of publishing books on Amazon. So we can lay the groundworks for another interview, you know, next month where we can cover. I would love to talk to you about some of your other research.
Sure. What do you got?
Well, I mean, why don't you tell? Let's see. What was the one that I saw that was about religion? You wrote one, the title of which looked very intriguing. It is, well, you did that. Pop Atheist Bible Expositors, featuring Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, Dan Barker, and Neil Degree. Now, this is a very relevant, salient book for the present day because these guys are all over everywhere. Sam Harris, Tyson, and Dawkins really control the narrative regarding this kind of stuff. So,
yes.
I mean, let me just to let you know, I read the intro about Sam Harris's book on Christianity. I can't remember the title of it, but I broke out laughing. It was such a joke. It's so bad. It was such a poor understanding of the book that it didn't have any basis in what was written in the New Testament. But for me, when I see Sam Harris talking, I just kind of smirk. I'm like, okay, whatever.
Right, but the thing is, you are discerning enough, and you have the background knowledge to know it's nonsense. But a lot of his young, angry, rebellious teenage fans, they just, Sammy said it. Well, then it must be true.
It's true. Yeah.
So that was an interesting book, because what I did is not focus on everything they have to say about religion and God, but specifically their statements about the contents of the Bible and how, frankly, how badly they misunderstand.
Yeah, I mean, and don't you think some of that misunderstanding is intentional? Because it doesn't, if they understood it, it wouldn't fit into their scientistical outlook.
Yeah, to say that it's purposeful would be going a little beyond my comfort level, because I would kind of have to be able to read the motivation of their hearts,
Right.
So I would definitely say that there's enough information out there that they should know better, especially being as smart as they claim to be.
Right. Well, I mean, I would think Christopher Hitchens is a brilliant guy, an atheist, but still brilliant. And these guys claim to be super intelligent, but I got to send you this link online. It was a YouTube question where somebody asked Richard Dawkins for the full title of
the Origin of the Species.
He couldn't spit it out.
No.
He just like ate his words, and the full title is Origin of the Species, or what is it? The struggle for races in the struggle for survival or something, right? So it's like, it's a race manual. It has a racist implication to it. The struggle of the favored races in the battle, the evolutionary struggle for the favored races in the battle for survival, or something like that.
It was on the origin of species by means of natural selection or the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life.
That's it. Or the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life. They conveniently never talk about that.
No, now, okay, the reason Dawkins was asked that question is because a study had come out about how many Christians, so-called, how many Christians in the UK could not even name the first book of the Bible, or didn't know their order, or which gospel came first, and all this. And so that's what happened, is they turned it around on Dawkins to talk about his favorite book, and yeah, he didn't know the title. But see, now you're getting me off into this subject. So
sorry,
basically,
I apologize.
No, it's fine. It's just that what I'm thinking about, how what happens in atheism is, okay, so you have this concept of the struggle for life. Okay, so basically, what happens in atheism is death, pain, and suffering is good, because the weak die off, the more fit survive. And this kind of struggle, this suffering in life is good, because it preserves the strong, and it's better for evolution.
Right.
Okay, so good is evil, evil is good, literally. And then you have, when you consider Adolf Hitler's major book, Mein Kampf, what does that mean?
Right, struggle. Yeah, you can draw a direct line from Darwinism to Hitler, right?
Right, and now some people will say Hitler was misinterpreting Darwin, but in either way, he was definitely a social Darwinist, and he tried to put these sort of concepts into effect. Right? So now let me loop around now and talk about calling good evil and evil good. When you think about why would people like Crowley do what they do, are they just sort of like pure evil? And what you find is sometimes you run across how Crowley would say that he considered what he was doing to be virtuous. Well, okay, when you consider some of the stuff he was doing, how could that possibly be? And the level of satanic deception, one thing I've noticed is in just about any secret society, mystery of religion, occult group, magical group, they have some bases in the Kabbalah, which is a form of Jewish mysticism. Yeah. And in the 1600s, there was a man named Shabbatai Tzvi. Okay, now he was a very far-out character. Like at one point, he underwent a wedding ritual where he got married to a Torah scroll. I mean, really, really outlandish stuff. But Tzvi says that, well, the Talmud says that the Messiah will come either in a generation that is altogether righteous or altogether wicked. Well, he figures he could not foresee a generation coming about that was going to be altogether righteous. So therefore, if he worked really hard to try to form a generation that was altogether wicked, then that would make the Messiah come.
Right.
Okay, can you wrap your mind around that?
Barely, but it's a
Okay.
very strange
Yes.
wrangling of
So
religion.
basically what he's saying is we want the Messiah to return, right? Because then the Messiah will rule.
Right.
Right? Now, we can do it by being altogether righteous, which doesn't seem like it's going to happen. So, hey, guess what? I had an idea. Let's be as wicked as we can possibly be, because then the Messiah will come and he'll rule.
Right. And didn't he have a
And so-
follower too? It was wasn't Frank based upon ZV?
Right, yes. So my point is, consider the satanic deception of setting out to live a lifestyle that's as sinful as possible while telling yourself you're doing it for a good reason. Okay, and this is how Crowley can then come along and say that virtue is vice, or vice is virtue, right? I'm committing all these sinful, horrendous, unspeakable acts, and they're virtuous. That's how messed up these people can get when they're spiritually deceived. It's literally white is black, black is white.
Right. I mean, the Bible says, "Woe unto those who call good evil and evil good." Right. So it's
Right.
not appropriate. Yeah. So I mean, that book. I mean, you've done a book on aliens, the alien deception, question of Jesus is the Messiah, Cain as serpent seed. I mean, you've published some pretty cool looking books that I definitely would like to. I mean, I don't know much about Enoch, so to talk about Enoch would be worthwhile, or get your opinion on that book, whether it's viable or valuable.
Sure, that book is not very long, and I just tried to hit the main points about what people claim about it and whether it bears out or not.
Gotcha.
Let me tell you something about the book on aliens,
Okay.
which, I, of course, in a tongue-in-cheek manner, I titled it 50 Shades of Gray Aliens.
Correct.
I'll tell you about one of the stories in there because, okay, I'm sure you recognize the name Whitley Strieber.
I do. I've heard that guy was associated or affiliated with the Process Church or something like that, or one of these occult groups.
Well, the thing about Strieber is I disagree with him 100%, but he is a fascinating character in that, for example, is he not the poster boy of the alien contact phenomena?
Yeah, communion, right? Wasn't that the big one?
Yes, but he has never ever claimed that he's in contact with aliens.
Interesting.
That's
So
how interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that's how interesting it is that he is the poster child for that, and he never claims. He refers to them as visitors.
Interesting.
Okay, so let me give you a quick rundown on him, because that story is not only relevant to the alien UFO issue, but to the occult issue.
Okay. Fire.
All right. So Strieber claims that these visitors first got in contact with him when he was doing what? Well, when he was in his meditation room.
Gotcha. Yeah, there you go.
Right. So he was involved in certain mystical practices, and he had a room in his house devoted to meditation, and there he is meditating, and there come these visitors. So that tells you something right there. Now, I think in the book I referred to him as a sort of Bertrand Russell character, and because it's known philosophically that Bertrand Russell changed his mind throughout his life a lot as he tried to figure things out. Well, Whitley Strieber is the same. And one of the first things that he thought about these visitors is that they were demons.
Interesting.
Okay, and so now what happens is then when people start talking about Whitley Strieber being demonized, then you have people like the Professor Jeffrey Kripal basically talking about these paranoid, dumb Christians who are saying that about Strieber. But hey, they got it from Strieber to start with.
Himself, right from the horse's mouth. Right?
Yeah. So now, as I would listen to Strieber, because he does a regular talk show, every now and then he would mention military ties with his family, and specifically that he knew people in the CIA. Very generic statements, but in the back of my head, I kind of opened up a little file that read, Whitley Strieber, MK Ultra victim.
Interesting.
The MK Ultra victim is what I thought, but you know, that was very generic, so I just kind of stored it in the back of my head. And then one day he did a talk where he straight up states that he does believe he was a victim of the specific MK Ultra mind control experiment.
Interesting.
And for instance, when he was a kid, he also underwent. Have you heard of a Skinner box?
It sounds familiar. They put you in a box or something?
Exactly. It's literally, it's just a form of sensory deprivation where you literally stick a child inside of a box. I mean,
'cause that's what Skinner did to his own kid, didn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, that was the Skinner box. That's what he you know, apparently that was high psychiatry back in the day.
Yeah. And they have a nice like euphemism for it. The operant conditioning chamber. You know?
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds so wonderful. Let's try it, William.
Let's try some operant conditioning. I'm going to do that right after we get done with this.
Yeah. So anyhow, Strieber then just came right out and is very open that he does believe that he underwent MK Ultra mind control experimentation.
Wasn't he in the UK at one point? Forgot. I could have swore that he was in.
I know he mostly lived in New York, but I'm sure he got around.
Okay.
So then I remember watching a video documentary about how there was supposedly footage of an actual alien that was kept in a secret military base, and you could see the alien right there on the footage. And to me, it was an obvious puppet. Okay, I mean, to me, it was obviously just a puppet. Now, they say, well, we contacted Whitley Strieber to get his opinion on it, but he was so freaked out he didn't want to appear on camera. But here's what he says. If that's not an actual video of an alien or a visitor, then whoever made the puppet knows how they move.
Interesting.
Okay, so that tells me this. Okay, it's an obvious puppet. So what does that tell me? When Strieber was being made to undergo MK Ultra experimentation, they trotted out this puppet and they made him believe that it's a real life being.
Fascinating. Right. So he
that's
really
how
was.
That's how it struck me. And now here's Strieber's ultimate conclusion is that yes, he underwent this mind control experimentation, but that he still does believe that the visitors were a real phenomena. And why is that? He says, well, because whenever I had experiences with the visitors, people who ran into me that day noted that I was agitated. Okay, you know, all right, that to me is a stretch like that traverses the length of the universe, because why not say, hey, I know I underwent MK Ultra experimentation, and the reason people noted I was agitated on that day is because all these CIA nuts were experimenting on me, not because some other dimensional beings were visiting me. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like an Occam's razor approach. You know, what's more likely, that you were agitated because you were being experimented upon with your military background and CIA contacts, or because some other dimensional entities were visiting you? So that to me, Strieber is a very fascinating character to me.
Yeah, I think I've heard somebody else the guy's name is Jason Horsley, who is researched Strieber and said that he had something strange. The blog is Occultculture, if you want to look that up. But he said there's something sketchy about Strieber and his associations in 1960s, the London kind of zeitgeist.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I got to go back and look at that. I don't remember it. I haven't really been a person who's followed the whole UFO stuff as much as others have, so I can't say I can speak to that. But I think we've done about an hour, and I just want to kind of wrap things up. The book that we talked about is available on Amazon. Again, it's Aleister Crowley's Influence on Pop-Occulture, How an Obscure Occultist Influences Culture from Beyond the Grave. It was recently published. It's an excellent book. Highly recommend it. Ken Ammi also has a number of other books that, I mean, I feel like we could do a show on each one of them. There's so many interesting. this Pop Atheist Bible Expositors, I think, is an important subject, considering that these guys are kind of out putting out their kind of scientistical view of the world.
Right.
So, and you also did another one, Zeitgeist to Poltergeist, about some very dangerous doctrines such as evolution, Nazism, communism. So,
right.
But anything else you'd like to share before we wrapped up?
No, it's just that I've definitely appreciated your work throughout the years, and I've appreciated you as a person, and I'm glad that we could end up writing 2 books that coincided so well.
I think so too, man. I appreciate you. So congrats for writing that book, man. So
yeah, likewise for yours. Yeah.
Yeah, man, it's great to talk to you. My movie is almost done. I actually am just kind of finishing up, so keep an eye out for that probably in the next week or two.
Smiley Face Killers.
Yeah, 3 hours, dude. It's going to be like 3 hours, 25 minutes. Lots of information, lots of you. You've been following it, so I know that you're kind of looking for that symbolism as well. So I think you'll find it of great interest.
I definitely look forward to it.
I will send you a free reviewer's copy, and you can post it on your website.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
If I can stream it properly, if I can figure that out. I finally figured out how to give out free ebooks, which on Amazon took me forever, but now I know how to do that, so that's good. All right, man, let's do it again. Let's shoot for next month. We'll go over one of these other books and promote that. How's that sound?
Let's just name the one, and we'll do it.
Awesome. All right. Ken, God bless. Thank you very much.
God bless you, too, and thank you, William.
Yeah, take care.